All right, good morning, party people. It is December 15th. Good morning. Okay, so we are in the New Testament this morning. Very exciting. We're back with Jesus. A lot of red. So, our daily reading today is John chapters 9, 10, 2 Corinthians 7, 8, Revelations 19, 20, Psalms 1, 2, and then the proverb number 11. Okay, so that's our daily reading for today. So, a few days ago when we were in John, we saw naughty Jesus healing on the Sabbath. He's always getting into trouble because of that. So we saw he was at I think it was the Feast of Tabernacles, and he had done the healing at the Pool of Bethesda, and that in 7:8. So we saw all of that in the confrontation with the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and all the religious people. So now we're in the same feast, right? So where we left off 7:8. So if you haven't seen the videos from 7:8, if you go back and watch those, what we're going to cover today is happened at the same time, right? So we have separation in the Bible of chapters. In reality, the story just continues, right? So this chapter 9 is continuing after all of the other things happened in 7:8. And so what we see here is Jesus restoring someone's sight who had been born blind, right? So chapter 9 says, "Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?'" So there was some belief at this time that when the sickness had to do with sin, and even if they were born blind, there were some that believed, there was a tradition where some that believed that you could sin in the womb, which is absolutely crazy. There are other traditions that I don't want to go into here, but this one tradition is the one that they think that they're referring to here, that you could sin while you're in the womb, which would result in him being born blind, or else his parents sinned, right? Because this is what he's saying, him or his parents, who sinned, that he's obviously been born blind. He didn't become blind through an accident or something, right? So Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Okay, so that's real short. So here we see Jesus answered them, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that God should use him to reveal his works," right? That's what Jesus is saying. And while Jesus is here, he's the light of the world, right? And so what you're seeing is he's addressing the disciples, right? He's not even addressing this man. And then you see him go up to the man. There's no communication that is recorded between Jesus and the man prior to him healing him, correct? It just says, when he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, so this is where Jesus addresses him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So there's several things I want to point out there. So he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva. So it was believed in that time that there was a healing power in the saliva and in the clay. So when Jesus did this and he put this on his eyes, because this is weird, even when it just sounds weird to us today, for sure. And even I was like, why did he do it that way? Because God can do it anyway, right? He could just speak the word. He could just look at him and think it, and he'd be healed, right? Well, there's always faith that is involved. And so one interesting thing about the commentary that they mentioned is that by Jesus doing these things, this was a normal way of healing for different things, for cuts or whatever, right? So this was an expected way of healing, and it was not unusual, right? So the man, even though he was blind and couldn't see Jesus, he recognized Jesus doing something in the natural that was natural. That was a natural way of healing, right? However, it was a supernatural act, right? As it becomes clear later, never in the history of the world, nowhere in the history of the Bible, anywhere has anyone been born blind and been made able to see, right? So he took a natural thing for the man to grasp. Okay, so the man who's blind is standing there going, okay, so he's putting saliva and clay on my eyes. Okay, that makes sense, right? That made sense to him. So that would have given him a little bit of faith, even in the midst of the craziness of the healing, of the possibility of the healing, right? Furthermore, when he goes, so he sends him to the pool of Siloam, which is the word sent. That represents the word sent, right? So just in the previous verse in chapter 4, so here's some a little bit of stuff with that. So chapter 4, it says, I must work the works of him who sent me. So right before he said, go to this pool, which the name means sent, he is saying that God sent me. Now I'm sending him, right, to this pool. And the pool is believed to be a part of the tunnel that Hezekiah built when he was standing up against Nebuchadnezzar, and there was miracles with that story. So all of this kind of, there's a lot of hidden shaded meanings with all of this, right? So the man went, washed, and came back seeing. Therefore the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, is this not he who sat and begged? Okay, now, because of this major transformation in this man, he's going to appear different, right? If you've never been able to see your entire life, you're going to walk differently. You're going to interact with people differently. If all of a sudden you can see, you're going to have a completely different demeanor. So you may look like the guy, but in fact, he's not doing anything like the guy who was blind was doing, right? So even his neighbors who had known him his whole life were like, wait a minute, is this the guy? So some said, and this is what it says. So verse 9, some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. He said, I am he. Therefore they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received sight. Then they said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. So that shows all of the interactions with him and the people after the healing, right? So the next section is says the Pharisees excommunicate the healed man. So there's a lot going on in this next section too. It's super great. Chapter 13. So verse 13, chapter 9. They brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now the reason they did this is because it was done on the Sabbath, right? So this is his family. His family's like, oh shit. This happened on the Sabbath. We're in trouble now, right? Because not supposed to be doing any of this stuff on the Sabbath, right? And I'm sure word has already gotten around about Jesus and Jesus healing on the Sabbath, because he's always getting into trouble because he's healing on the Sabbath. So here we go. This is a crazy healing that happened on the Sabbath. And it says, so verse 13, they brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was the Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. So he'd already been asked by his neighbors, how did this happen? Now the Pharisees are asking him. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. So that's immediately the first thing they go to. Jesus is not keeping their rules of the Sabbath, right? Then others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them, right? So within the ruling Levitical class, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, there was a division. Some of them recognized, they weren't ready to recognize him as who he is, but they recognized that there was something going on here that they had never seen before. And then they said to the blind man again, what do you say about him because he opened your eyes? So now as they're fighting among themselves, they turn to the guy whose eyes were healed, right? And he says he is a prophet. So for the first time when he's questioned about Jesus, he says he is a man, right? He answered and said, these are to the neighbors. He answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes. And now as time is going by, he's recognizing that there's more going on here. And he says, now he's calling him a prophet. And he's calling him a prophet to the religious leaders. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight. So they didn't believe him. They thought this was all BS, until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? Now this is really interesting. They're doing this in a legalistic term. This was like as if they were in a courtroom. So they were legally asking them, is this your son? Question 1, who you say was born blind, right? Was he born blind? How then does he now see? So this was very legalistic, and I am out of time. So I'm going to finish this in the second video, okay? Hold tight. Jesus is coming. Read your Bible. Hold tight for number 2. Peace.